What are you staring at?
Do I look like a mouse to you?
Did you like my sunglasses? You idiot!
Believe me, you haven't played a game like this one. It's almost like a movie. With something along those lines, I was presented with this game back in the year 1999. I've seen already some accolades in the magazines, but as usual, I was just one skeptical 12-year-old brat. What do they all know? They're all probably stupid and I'm the whiz kid. This game is probably nothing special. So I popped the game in and boy was I never the same. And that's because Metal Gear awesome. I mean, Metal Gear Solid is awesome. The sheer scale of awesomeness that this game presents is hard to grasp. There are so many big and little facts and details that make MGS awesome that I don't know where to properly start. Maybe from the beginning, you might ask? Okay then, let's start by giving it some context in time, shall we? In order to understand why Metal Gear Solid is so awesome, we need to go back to the times when it was relevant. And that's the year 1998, when PS1 was dominating the gaming market. Sure, we have Metal Gear and Metal Gear 2 Solid Snake, but name me one person who played them back in the day on the MSX. You can't? Me neither. Even though Metal Gear Solid heavily borrows ideas from Metal Gear 2, there was no problem since the game was pretty much the introduction to the series for the entire world. Me included. Throw in 3D capabilities of the technology of the time and everything was working out in the favor for Hideo Kojima, the father behind the Metal Gear series, to materialize the idea of a movie in the video game. One thing is having 2D sprites with lots of text, but a totally different thing is seeing acted and voiced out 3D models of characters in the believable 3D environments. The level of immersion is multiplied by probably a million, and then some. Back in the 90s, you would have plenty of games with strong narrative and big stories like Out of This World, Diablo, Fallout, Planescape Torment, Sanitarium, Chrono Trigger, Heroes of Might and Magic 3, but there wasn't a game like Metal Gear Solid. I've never come across a game with such memorable everything. Every little detail is thought out for this game. You have a gigantic story to be experienced? Yes you do. A selection of highly detailed and memorable characters with phenomenal voice acting? Yes you do. You have attention to detail so vivid that even to this day you will uncover something new? Yes you do. You have a genre that this game made so popular that is relevant even to this day? Yes you do. Metal Gear Solid was awesome because you were not prepared for this game. This was groundbreaking and dangerously alluring. I haven't met one person that didn't like the original Metal Gear Solid and I wasn't quite surprised as to what were they witnessing. Once this game grabs, you're hooked for life. Don't believe me? Let's throw some more chips into the pot of awesomeness. A ridiculously deep and rich story that could have easily rivaled any Hollywood blockbuster is one of the biggest reasons why MGS is awesome. After all, Kojima wanted to be a movie director first, so when that career path didn't happen, he figured he might give it a go on another medium, games. After two first Metal Gears and a brief stint with Snatcher and Police Knots, it was time to pour everything he has learned into this game, and it showed. Underneath the supposed typical story of one guy infiltrating enemy lines and defeating a bunch of antagonists in order to stop a potential catastrophe lies numerous layers of vastly characterized array of cast, plot twists, multiple interpretations, love story, tragedy, conspiracy. Metal Gear Solid story has it all. This is not really yet another interpretation of Die Hard, or maybe Escape from New York even though Snake Plissken and Solid Snake look suspiciously alike, almost conducting a lawsuit alike. Luckily, that didn't happen. Anyways, this is much more than a simple story. Playing this as a 12-year-old kid, you would think, okay, this is typical. You're in control of the Solid Snake, ex-Foxhound hero whose job is to infiltrate alone the terrorist-occupied nuclear warhead storage facility in order to save some important bases and investigate whether the terrorists have the ability to launch the nuclear missiles if their demands are not met. You know, you're the good guy, the terrorists led by Liquid Snake are the bad guys, and in the end, good guys always win. In other words, you infiltrate and do everything according to Colonel, and you kill the baddies, destroy Metal Gear Rex, and voila, all good. But when I grew up and acquired some intelligence along the way, at least I think I did, and when I played the game again, it felt like a new game. The story hits differently. Suddenly there is no only good and only bad guys. Suddenly it's not so black and white. It's all shades of grey. Since Metal Gear Solid has a good chunk of in-game cinematics and codec conversations, you will marvel at masterful camera scenes and voiceovers. Every character, no matter how important or not, has a bunch of lines to say to enrich the story. Look at this conversation with the DARPA chief or Kenneth Baker. Each of them has roughly 20 minutes of game time to talk, and in those 20 minutes you will learn a lot. Every forward into the boss battle is an act of its own. Every time you're about to have a confrontation with a certain boss character, you know it must be grand, poetic, theatrical, and that prolific verbal passages needed to be exchanged. It's like each and every one of them have experienced a life of 1,000 years and read the entire Alexandria library to the point of it being ridiculous. But I'm just a sucker for it, so I don't care. Just bring it. Among other things, it was also the genre that makes Metal Gear Solid awesome. Back then, in the year 1998, the stealth way of playing games was nowhere near as popular before MGS arrived. It was always a method of exercising guns blazing approach and nothing else. But in MGS, a heavy emphasis was dealt on sneaking around, trying to evade any form of confrontation if possible. Rather than killing enemies, it's better to work your way around them, effectively getting away from their line of sight, and also trying to get away from the surveillance camera field of vision. However, the top-down camera is something that got old pretty quick, and I can understand the newer generations of gamers hating this in the first two MGS games. I'm personally used to it, but I cannot deny the frustration when you need to press the button for the first-person mode just to see something in front of you. Walking around this way, turns out you have a lousier field of vision than just about anybody in this game. Well, maybe this was all an excuse to create a countermeasure called Soliton Radar system. It's an interesting mechanic that allows you to see the map of the field, rooms, camera field of vision, and enemies with their field of vision. But once you're spotted, that same radar stops working and you have a countdown. It's like a punishment of sorts. Once it was working for you and now it's working against you, and you better have luck running away from the enemies with your limited vision since the main camera is top down, at least until the meter cools down. All I know back then is that every other nickname of every gaming forum on the interwebs had something with the words Solid Snake, and so on. That cannot be a coincidence now, can it? For a vast amount of teenage dirtbags, especially those who identified themselves as males, they held our favorite protagonist as a role model, or maybe even an idol. Because Solid Snake is cool, Solid Snake is awesome, and since he is the main part of the Metal Gear Solid, by semi-failed logical conclusion we can say that he is the one of the main reasons why this game is awesome. Voiced by now famous voice actor David Hayter in a gruff, husky manner, Solid Snake is kinda stereotypical in appearance, almost a carbon copy of an American midlife-aged war hero who's lived long enough to have a dangerous tendency to become a disgruntled old man. If you have a hard time understanding what I even mean by all of this, just think about the Snake Plissken from Escape from New York and the way Kurt Russell looks and acts, and there you have it, a blatant copy. What makes him great is the way that he handles all of the situations thrown at him. No matter how hard it is, he will always carry on without losing his composure. Everything can be a lesson in disguise that you can learn from if you're smart enough. Even though at first his personal China walls are high, as he is cold as frozen hell, throughout the game we can see a gradual transformation and erosion of the same walls. He is becoming more human, so to speak. He even indulges in emotional attachment towards the wiggly-ass woman called Meryl. Not her ass, but her as a person. Her ass is just for admiration, or an element of recognizing her amongst other soldiers. A regular person as an unplanned organism is a question asked by nature and answered by death, while Solid Snake is the offspring of knowledge and imaginations and thus another kind of question. One of the 3 surviving terrible children of the total of 8 clones in the image of a perfect soldier Big Boss. If you're engineered from the start to be a soldier, how could you possibly be any different than Solid Snake is? That's why some of the Fox Sound members will not hesitate to notice that Solid Snake is a cold-blooded killer when necessary. After all, the entire game is set that way that we as a player impersonate Solid Snake and we make the decisions. You can notice that Solid Snake usually obeys orders and will always do as he is told, even though he becomes suspicious. It's not enough to deviate from the mission and he will ask a lot of trivial, meaningless questions. So thus, Solid Snake is the player, A vector controlled by us while being manipulated by the entire game to do exactly what we are supposed to do. Name me one game from the era that does this. I'm waiting.
It was filled with the joy of battle. You're wrong.
And that's why Metal Gear Solid is awesome.
You don't have to deny it. We were created to be that way.
Created?
To put it simply, every single character in this game is awesome on their own merit. On your side via codec communication we have a Roy Campbell or Colonel that is in charge of the operation, followed by gene therapy specialist Naomi Hunter. These two can be typical in their roles, as you can hear, even though they serve as a communication buddies. Sometimes they provide hints should you be stuck in a situation, but they seem to know more about this crisis than they are willing to share. But as usual, the yarn of conspiracies will be unraveled as the plot goes on anyways. Let's not forget about Mei Ling, because she's hot and Snake wants to bang her. I mean, she's our save game meister that will throw a Chinese proverb here and there to amuse us. And she's also the designer of the radar system. How cool is that? The friendly characters Snake meets along the mission are the Meryl and Otacon. Meryl, the rookie-eyed redhead new recruit that is held in prison, and Otacon, otaku anime mecha nerd that is responsible for the design of Metal Gear Rex for all the naive wrong reasons. Through the game, these will gradually unfold their life stories and how they wound up here in this godforsaken place. Luckily, they will selflessly help Snake anytime they can. And now, the antagonists. Like I said, for most of them you will have an epic introduction in a form of cutscene or two that will blow you away. These cinematics are just too awesome. When you confront the first boss, Mr. Shalshaska himself, called Revolver Ocelot, wielding his Colt single action army, bragging about it and his skills, you know it's gonna be an interesting battle. I mean, after all, he fires first, then talks. Let the gun do the talk first. Luckily the Snake is agile, so nothing happens. Poor Baker tied with C4 bombs must be thinking, oh my god, why am I here tied and forced to watch these two lunatics running around and shooting themselves? There's also this mysterious ninja who claims to be neither enemy nor friend, but he has a nasty habit to get into the party uninvited to wield this katana around slicing Ocelot's hand or slicing cards like in this instance. Turns out this ninja is a member of Snake's and Naomi's past, and he is coming here to settle the score once and for all. After all, he is just a shadow of his former Grey Fox self, and the exoskeleton is essentially him being the MGS version of Darth Vader. All he wants to do is feel alive again, and what's the best medicine for that? A little bit of fist fight, because pain is a reminder that you are still alive. Now here comes to one of the greatest fourth wall breaker boss battles ever, and that is, yeah, you guessed it right, Psycho Mantis. Thinking way too much outside the box was the king with this one. First of all, Psycho Mantis' soul-searching ability is essentially reading memory cards, and if you have save game blocks from other Konami games of the era, he will comment on that and mention the games such as Suikoden, Azure Dreams or Castlevania. He will also determine what kind of a person you are as a player, judging by your playstyle and a number of saving game data. If you do not believe him, just put the controller on the floor and he will indeed move it by the power of will. In essence, the vibration against hard surfaces creates a gradual movement, so it's a cool feature to freak the unsuspecting players even more than necessary. For the final fourth wall break, in order for Mantis not to be able to read your moves in a fight, you need to plug the controller into the second slot. This way he will often shout how he cannot read your mind in disbelief, as you can hit him with every fist and foot, not every 8. What an awesome fight. A Vulcan Raven with his condescending verbal passages towards Snakes is typical while making Raven superior in any way possible. Superior or not, not even a tank or a giant Gatling gun helped him against my Nikita launcher or Claymore mine strategy. Sniper Wolf can talk all day long how she can wait for 10,000 days for a target to snipe it off, or that woman naturally makes better assassins. I can just swallow a bunch of diazepam and here we go. Steady scope and she's down. Pretty blonde with a tragic story and a tragic love of our Otacon. Can love bloom in these circumstances? I guess it can, but is it smart? I'm not really sure. I think there's only our evil twin brother left. Liquid will try to use Russian gunship Hind D to kill a man, but behold, this man has a Stinger missile launcher, so there that fool goes. But he's like a cat with 9 lives, so he's still alive. For a man of a great intelligence, he is stupid as a boss fight because he will lose a fight using Metal Gear Rex against you. He has a big ass mecha weapon armed with missiles, railgun or nuclear warhead, and he didn't win. I guess his stupid recessive genes made him weak. He will even lose in a fistfight or in a final chase scene, but these events weren't enough to kill him. He will die from something else. As a character, he is quite charismatic and very intelligent, apart from boss battles obviously. The vocal delivery from Cam Clark is outstanding and it just amplifies his coolness. He's even good at manipulating Solid Snake in more ways than one. But that's the whole section I wanna talk about a bit later on. Speaking of voice acting, this would all be nothing without these awesome vocal deliveries from the names such as David Hayter, Christopher Randolph, Debbie Mae West, Patrick Zimmerman, Doug Stone and the others. Compare the voice acting of the games such as Resident Evil to this. It's like night and day. It's like comparing a C-class amateur high school movie to a billion-dollar Hollywood blockbuster. It's that different. MGS set a benchmark so high for the years to come. It will be a sin not to mention the audio part of this awesome game. The main theme is just your classical number that oozes thrill and action, making you feel like you're gonna watch an awesome movie. However, turns out that this music piece was heavily inspired by the song Troika, a Soviet classical music piece composed by Georgy Sviridov in 1974. Check it out. The resemblance is just uncanny. And then you have the musical number called Cavern that plays as you start to play the game. Liquid is in the back going up the elevator and the credits are still rolling as you sneak around metal containers trying to avoid the guards. It feels like an atmospheric musical introduction to what's more to come. The encounter is the music piece you will remember very quickly as it triggers every time someone or something spots you and your radar goes red. The main thing about it is the tempo, suspense and the urgency it creates. It's almost like it forces you to try to find the cover away from the danger until the countdown goes to 0. Musical numbers such as Mantis's Hymn, Intruder or Rex's Lair are perfect for setting up the atmosphere of omnipresent suspensefulness. Without them, these scenes wouldn't be nearly as powerful as they are.
I'm sure she still has it.
What especially makes this game awesome is the sheer amount of details, or should I say, clinically obsessed attention to detail. Where do I even start? Okay, how about a bit with Meryl's codec number? Baker says it's on the back of the CD case. Yep, the actual CD case of Metal Gear Solid if you purchase it. There's one screenshot with the conversation with Meryl and you can see the codec number right there. Even though you have like 200 frequencies, so it's not really hard to track her down. But it's a nice little feature. Let's talk about cardboard boxes. You can use them to hide from guards, most of the time. But each box can be used as a means to travel. Each box has a different name written on it, so if you jump in the truck cargo area like in this instance, you can travel to the other areas faster. You can also be an asshole if you want and you hit Meryl here and immediately hide in a box. Little Wolf will actually pee on you. This stupid moving crane in a blast furnace can be dealt in two ways, by going under it or by blowing it with rockets. I never knew until recently that you can actually destroy it. Very nice. If you have a problem noticing freshly cemented walls to place C4 on them, the color is different. Using a knocking technique and a different sound can give you a clue where to place the bomb. If you somehow manage not to collect thermal goggles, there's always an alternative way to find where the red lasers are. It's all about cigarettes Snake smuggled in his stomach. The smoke will reveal the lasers, so they're easily avoidable. The trade-off is Snake gradually losing his health as he smokes. If you somehow manage not to collect the mine detector, you can always scroll on the floor and collect the Claymore mines. Let's get deeper into this iceberg of details and show some more things you might miss along the way. For example, in the section where Ninja slices and kills these unfortunate guards like in some horror movie, if you look closely, the last sliced guard will still be breathing. After the fight with the ninja, the guard will no longer be breathing, which indicates that he has succumbed to the fatal wounds. While you're there, in the room where you are fighting with the ninja, there's even a slightly ugly model of PlayStation 1 being put on the counter. Look at the walls and you can barely see a Police Nuts poster, a visual novel from 1994 that was also made by Kojima/Konami. Speaking of Police Nuts, this short jingle right here is actually the main theme of the Police Nuts called End of the Dark. How cool is that? With Meryl, there are several details you can notice if you play this game long enough. The first one is right at the beginning, as you can see her doing exercises in the cell while you are in the air duct. Go in and out several times, and every time she will change the type of exercise she's doing. If you check her out 4th time, she will start to repeat them, but this time without trousers. What a pervert this Snake is. Next, Detail is trying to figure out which of the guard is she in the B1 section of Nuke building. If you pay attention closely, you can see her making exaggerated feminine movements with her hips. Expose yourself to her and she'll run towards the woman's bathroom. Be quick enough and she'll have no time to get in the uniform, so she'll be without trousers again. You pervert. And almost immediately you can do this, staring at her. She'll be embarrassed and her skin will gradually turn red. Did you also know that MGS is not the first game that has Meryl as a character? That's right, you can see her in the Police Nuts too, even though she has a different background and personality. But that Foxhound tattoo is still present, right? When fighting against Sniper Wolf for the second time, as soon as you get to the snowfield, grab the Nikita launcher and launch a rocket in the first person mode. Navigate for a while and... now look who is lying down there. Yup, that's her. Unfortunately, you cannot kill her this way, but you can definitely use the Nikita launcher in the fight against her, even though it's a bit clumsy. It's easier to resort to good old trusty PSG-1 sniper. On the same snowfield, you can find a used white parachute. This indicates that Liquid Snake saved himself from the falling H&D chopper. What a nice missable little detail. While we are talking about Sniper Wolf again, her handkerchief that Arakan gives you, it contains her scent, so if you hold it while walking in caves, these four-legged bastards will love you. Let's dive deeper more into this iceberg. So, details like this are really easily missable, since most of them require either you thinking outside of the box or being too pedantic and calling your crew every 5 seconds. Here are some of the examples. If you shoot ravens in the cargo elevator, the colonel will say that they are not paying you to be a scarecrow. Also, Vulcan Raven will shame you for the act of disgrace. During the fight with Liquid in a H&D, your crew can suggest that you can register where exactly he is positioned by using stereo speakers. That is unless you use a mono TV. Yes, old TV used to have just one speaker, so the entire Kodak crew starts to take a piss and they mock you relentlessly for having a mono TV. While you enter the women's bathroom, you can call Mei Ling or Nastasha Romanenko to witness a verbal assault, because how dare you enter it? Mei Ling will even refuse to give you save game option as she is being furious. What do you know now, eh? But there's the question, how dare they assume Snake's gender? What if he identifies as being a female? I know this game is older than these modern tropes, but still. If you're fast to clear this section in the beginning and you go up the elevator, the colonel will congratulate you by saying that age hasn't slowed you down one bit. Well, if you do it way too long, he will say that you might be rusty. In the first Kodak conversation with her, Meryl says that Solid Snake is a legendary hero, and Solid Snake usually doesn't like being called a hero, so let's improve that. After she opens the door, you can act confused and go back to the heliport. Call Meryl and she will no longer think that you're a hero. After a run up the communication tower A and shooting a bunch of guards along the way, if you immediately call your crew, the Snake will talk like he's out of breath and the colonel will mock him saying that he's out of shape. So yeah, I could pretty much go on and on since there's tons of secret stuff and details, which goes to show how mental Kojima and Konami were back in the day. After all these years, there's always something new to uncover, and that's why this game is awesome. Here comes the part that should be identified as philosophical dissertation about why this game is awesome, and I should dissect its story elements as much as possible, without interference of the future sequels and S3 plan. This is how I was understanding the story over the years. Like I said before, when you're a 12-year-old snotty kid with limited knowledge about the English language and how the world works, then you understand this game as a typical Hollywood-type movie cliché. You almost immediately take for granted that Solid Snake and his crew are the good guys, and the terrorists with your evil twin brother as a boss are ultimately the bad guys. They want big money and Big Boss's DNA to create genetically powerful soldiers, otherwise they'll launch a nuclear strike. And of course, you almost single-handedly take them all down with the slight help of Meryl and Arakan. After several years and expanding the English dictionary while learning more about life, playing this game hits differently. As you play the game, listen to every Kodak conversation, and if you don't skip the cutscenes, you get a better understanding that this game is not really all black and white, but shades of grey. Every person has their own motive for appearing in the story. As the game goes on, you realize that Colonel knows a lot more about everything than he is actually sharing, leaving you as Solid Snake pretty dumb, especially in certain situations such as sudden heart attacks of DARPA Chief and Kenneth Baker. Turns out that you have been injected with a smart retrovirus called Foxdie that targets specific people and kills them. It also turns out that Naomi Hunter, a geneticist who did such a thing, is not really Naomi Hunter at all. She, whoever she is, has a hidden plot against Snake that involves her brother-sister relationship with Frank Yeager called Grey Fox. At the opposite side of the spectrum, you have Liquid Snake, who can't seem to get over him being supposedly an inferior clone of the big boss, while Solid Snake got all the dominant genes and thus became a superior clone. So making a nuclear threat and surrounding himself with the members of Foxhound might be just a big afterthought. Because with big money and Big Boss's DNA, he might achieve the goal of creating even more super soldiers in the image of Big Boss. People like him and Solid Snake don't belong in the world where there is peace. They lose their sole purpose, so maybe by inflicting a nuclear catastrophe, there comes a way for them to be useful again. At least that's why I've gathered that Liquid is romanticizing that idea. But this is where the story becomes twisted to the point of being absurd. Turns out that the entire plot is one big manipulation in which you, as a player controlling Solid Snake, is manipulated and obeyed into doing everything that was required of him. How is that possible? See, the first clue is the DARPA chief himself. While being held captive after torture, Solid Snake sees a decaying body of DARPA chief. It's strange that he was dead for just a few hours and already has the worms on him. This indicates that he was dead at least 2 or 3 days. Another suspicious mismatch was Baker telling that he has the surgical implants in the brain to resist mind reading. DARPA chief should have the same treatment, yet he said that Sycophant has read his mind. These two knew the passcodes for activating Metal Gear Rex. Baker talked because he wasn't trained to resist torture, but what about the DARPA chief? Turns out it was Decoy Octopus disguised as DARPA chief. So what happened with the real DARPA chief? Turns out that the revolver assault accidentally killed him during the torture interrogation. So in reality they didn't have the capability to launch a nuclear missile from the beginning. But Psychomantis said that he has an idea, a big idea. This entire cutscene section was a supposed hallucination of the Solid Snake. But was it? If the terrorists don't have the ability to blow up the entire world, what now? They're harmless now. Fake it until you make it? Liquid probably knows about PAL cards that can activate the Metal Gear Rex, so in conjunction with Psychomantis, he creates an elaborate scheme in which this entire section of Shadow Moses becomes one big manipulated corridor for someone to go in and do the work for them. That poor guy is going to be Solid Snake. But that's kinda ridiculous, since even if Liquid knows that Solid Snake is a very capable soldier, after all, these brothers should be identical in their power and intelligence. There can always be a miscalculation in this entire scheme in a vein of death by other enemies or whatever. There's always a chance that something will happen and that Snake won't be able to make it to input PAL cards to activate Rex for them. So what then? This might be too far-fetched, but it looks like it's just like that. So in essence you have the terrorists with big empty threats that should act real, so somebody infiltrates and makes them accidentally relevant again. Awesome. Now, playing this game in my 30s hits even more differently. Now I look at this game as one big giant conspiracy theory. What if everyone from Team Solid Snake, Colonel, Naomi, Mei Ling, whatever, knew everything from the very start and they chose to give a strictly limited amount of the information to him just so he can carry on with the mission? What if they got their confirmation with the death of Decoy Octopus, fake DARPA chief, that the terrorists are unable to launch a nuclear strike, so Solid Snake as a vector, carrier of the virus Foxdie, can proceed in killing them? What if they knew that the PAL card will activate the Metal Gear Rex, but they actually wanted it to be activated, just like they wanted the optical disc with all the test data, so the Ministry of Defense with Jim Houseman can take this joint black market venture from the hands of terrorists and arm the USA with a new type of nuclear weapon? So in essence, when Solid Snake represents himself as being a pawn sent here in Alaska to do this mission, he wasn't kidding. He was a pawn alright the entire time, but he was a pawn manipulated by both sides, his sides and Liquid in the form of Master Miller. But each side had their own reasons for using the most powerful weapon ever created. So Solid Snake turns out to be just a stupid, merciless killer and a bad guy. That's at least something that Liquid tries to imply on him before the fist fight. But if they are genetically identical twins and Liquid has a high intelligence of IQ 180, Solid Snake should have the same intelligence. But all he does is follow orders and ask so many stupid questions without much thinking. But is Solid Snake really that stupid or not? What if maybe Solid Snake also knows everything but he needs to pretend not to know? Because being a soldier on a battlefield is the only thing he knows, so he can satisfy the fix, or he can justify his shallow take on his miserable existence. Maybe he needs to act this way because he represents us, the players. We are in control of him, so he is our pawn. But that means that the entire game manipulates us, chews us and spits us out. Until we start to think critically and we start to ask the right questions. So everything you do in this game and all of the sentiments you gain along the way are secondary. The real purpose is not to take everything for granted and to observe every word and action until you gain the ability to do the objective interpretation of everything. So Metal Gear Solid can teach us a thing or two about life, so that's why it's awesome. Or maybe this whole paragraph is just my pretentious monologue about something so simple as growing up. But hey, don't forget to enjoy the game too. P.S. Don't forget to wait for the moment after the credits. There you hear a familiar voice. Who is the real mastermind here all along now, huh?
That's right. Until the very end, Liquid thought he was the inferior one.
So after all has been said and done, how to wrap this up properly? I don't know, but I know this. The awesomeness from this game was widely recognized, so Metal Gear Solid became a wild phenomenon that lasts even to this day. A plethora of sequels and spin-offs were made, with even more complicated storylines and casts of characters, which in turn pushed many fans into deep analysis of the games, making their own theories. Some of them are crazier than the others, but hey, what can you do if you like the game that much? This also propelled Hideo Kojima into an entity of its own. When a game has that famous subtitle that spells "A Game by Hideo Kojima", you know you won't be bored. Well, I hope I have succeeded in giving this game a proper analysis regarding all the parts of what makes it awesome. And also, if you're seeing this, I cannot thank you enough for watching this video, and I hope you liked it. And until next time, Kanpai.